about 20 seconds off the start that we're completely cut off. So
Okay.
it can just be me babbling that gets cut off.
That's okay.
And it looks like, okay, it looks like it's not going yet. So let's see.
I wish I could help, but I don't really know technology. I'm like, this is cool that you set this up. I don't know how it works, but it's neat.
Yeah, in theory, it's cool that I can set it up. Babbling that gets cut off. There we are.
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So we are semi-live. We're a few seconds behind, but I can monitor chats, I think, first on different platforms. But anyway, so welcome to everyone who's here. Thank you for being here. Just to give some background, because I think we're bridging some different platforms here. So the original intent of having Zack with us was for human and wildlife ecology, which is a course at Fleming College. And like everything else, it has been switched up a little bit with everything going on in the world and physical distancing and things like that. So our students were really looking forward to having Zack in and talking about falconry, and thankfully he agreed to still be here. So there's also some other things going on. I know Zack's mom is here. I think maybe my parents are here. And when I'm not at Fleming, I run a pest control company. So we threw that out, threw this opportunity out on our Facebook page as well. So lots of different folks may be coming in and interested in things from different backgrounds, but this is a nice inclusive place to welcome all of you and officially welcome Zack. So hi, Zack. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're so excited to have you. Can you maybe start by just telling us a little bit about you and how you got to where you are?
Sure. So hopefully a few of you tuning in, especially my mom, know who I am. I was working in EM for a while, filling in for Jason Kerr last semester. So I may not be too unfamiliar face to those of you that were around for that time. But yeah, I'm a graduate of the Fish and Wildlife Technology program from Fleming, the 3-year program. And I've worked in a few different places, conservation authorities, consulting companies, contracts along the way. And most recently, I'm working for a company called Falcon Environmental as a wildlife control officer. But prior to that, I had an interest in falconry as a kind of hobby for myself, or more of a lifestyle, really. It's a pretty big commitment. But yeah, I fly a red-tailed hawk on my own time during the hunting season. Unfortunately, I really had hoped to be able to bring in some birds, but this is the best we could do. So one day, though, I will be able to bring some birds around for folks to check out on campus, I'm sure. And yeah, falconry is something that's really interested me in the past few years. So I'm happy to share some information and answer some questions.
Awesome. How long have you been involved with it now?
My first experience with falconry, or at least with birds of prey, was probably when I was about 15 years old. I was working at a registered charity that did animal therapy camps for people with special needs. And we were hoping to use the birds to develop some programming to bring people together and teach them about wildlife and give them an experience that they wouldn't otherwise be able to have. And in the process of that, I became a member of the Ontario Hawking Club. So it's a volunteer-based organization. They don't have any governance or anything like that. It's just the falconers in the province came together and said, let's put all this under one roof. Let's have some annual events and let's keep the sport going and keep people who are in it for the right reasons in it. So yeah, that was about when I was 15 years old, I think was my first experience. So 10 years ago. Wow, I feel old. Yeah.
Time flies, eh?
Yep.
And how big a group is that at this point? Do you know?
I think across the province, we are still under 200. We don't know the exact numbers, falconers, but in terms of club members, we're well over 100. So that's pretty exciting because it is a great opportunity to meet and greet people and learn a bit about it. I was a club member for 8 years until I got my actual falconry sponsorship. So this is something that you got to put some time into and really meet the right people and the right connections and get yourself into a place where your life is conducive to it. You have to have the facilities for birds. You have to have the time, and it's a daily thing. There's no day off with falconry.
Sounds like teaching.
Yeah, pretty much. Teaching and learning at the same time with a bird.
Best of both worlds.
Yeah.
So you may have answered this a little bit already, but my first question that I had kind of scheduled was what got you started in falconry?
Yeah, so again, the work experience I mentioned, but for me, just I've worked with lots of different animals, both in captive settings and wildlife settings, and the birds of prey just kind of clicked. They just captivated me. I'm not a bird guy per se. I'm not a birder, and I know there may be some birders tuning in, and I tip my hat to them because I don't have the. It's something that never clicked with me to go out and be able to take such amazing photographs or be able to identify them from such a distance, and that's an amazing hobby. So for me, this is my bit of birding. It's a little more interactive, and the birds of prey themselves are so unique that I've been hooked ever since.
Nice. And what is the process to get started for anyone who may be interested?
First thing you want to do is research, research, research. I think a lot of people underestimate what the reality of it is. It's a long term commitment to one or more living things, and it's not. I'm bored of this. I'm going to put it on the shelf and not use it. Like a lot of hunting, where you may acquire a certain type of firearm or a certain bow or whatever equipment. These animals aren't equipment, nor are they a pet. They kind of fall in this window. So to really get started, the first step is to contact your local Ministry of Natural Resources office and make sure that your location is conducive to it. Urban environments, you can still practice falconry. It just has to be done in the right way, and you have to house your birds in appropriate facilities. But even folks in Toronto can have an element of falconry in their lives so long as local bylaws allow them to keep the birds. So there is some legislation you have to be aware of. Falconry is regulated through the MNRF, so your local district office would be the first place to go. As well, throughout the year, the Ontario Hawking Club has events, so we do an apprentice workshop in the spring. I'll get you some dates, Juliette, if there's anyone interested, and we can post that up for students. And as always, they can come to me with questions. We do the apprentice workshop. We do an educational event at Luther Marsh, and we have an annual field meet. And for me, the field meet is my Christmas. I commit to going to that one every year. It's a blast. You start to recognize the faces and talk to them about, hey, how's your year been? What have you been doing with your birds? Have you gotten any new birds, any new tactics? What have you been up to? So it's a real great opportunity to learn and connect. But like I said before, it is a really long-term investment in terms of time, not so much financially. Everything comes with some bit of a financial obligation, but just be ready to put some time into learning before you actually have a bird on your glove. Because like I said, it's real lifetime commitment if you're in this for the long haul.
And what is the lifespan? I'm sure it depends on the species, but is there an average lifespan of the bird you would be getting?
Yeah, it does vary by species. Basically, the groupings you could say for falconry birds are falcons, hawks, and eagles. Ontario, it's not very conducive to fly eagles. They can live 40 to 50 years, so that's a lifetime commitment that may even exceed your own, depending on what age you start. So those birds are something that I'm fascinated with as well. But again, feasibly, I know I can't house an eagle appropriately and get it enough time out hunting. And but there are folks in the province that have them and are doing really well with those birds. Most people start with a hawk or a falcon, and your lifespan there, you're looking at 20 to 30 years, so long as the bird is well cared for along the way. And to exceed 30 years isn't unheard of. I have a colleague that has a 34-year-old, I think, red-tailed hawk who was experiencing some health issues, and they thought maybe that that's a really old bird. And then they put him on glucosamine. The bird has arthritis, and it's back on its feet and doing well. So 34 years old, going strong. It's they last a while if you take care of them.
Wow, that is long term. Holy smokes! I had no idea.
Yep.
Crazy. Okay, so what would a typical day look like for you in falconry?
Well, given my work schedule lately, the typical day is long, both for my own falconry, putting time into that, and then at work, having live birds of prey. That is a time commitment on the clock as well. So I'm usually up around 4 or 5 in the morning, getting ready for work, attempting to put some food into my own system, turning lights on for my birds, and doing a morning weigh-in. So just so I have an idea of what the bird's weight is at, especially in the season. you want to know that they are on weight. So every bird has a weight that they hit where they have that drive to not only come back to you, but to engage in the hunt and actively be looking for prey. And this is something that nature would do to them. They eventually lose body weight if they're not successful as hunters, and their only option is to get successful at hunters. The beautiful thing about falconry is that if the bird is not successful at the end of the day, it still has a meal. So it's a pretty good life for a bird. If you're a falconry bird versus a wild bird, we tend to make sure that they make it through every single day. So 5 or 6 in the morning, I'm pulling out some food to thaw, usually whole body quail or something like that, because you do want to make sure that they have feather, bone, skin, everything that they would be eating on real quarry, they need to have in their diet. They can't just have prepared meat. It has to be whole bodied. So that's really important. And then I'm at work sometime from 6 a.m. to 8 or 9 p.m. And what we do at work is active patrolling for wildlife on the airfield to, employ some preventative measures and make sure that by having certain birds out on the wing, which is when they're actually being flown, just having their presence alone is enough of a deterrent for, I would say, over half the wildlife that would be coming onto the airfield. And then after that, we have some other methods, pyrotechnics, which are a loud kind of explosive light show, almost like a firework going off essentially. And you set those off with a flock of gulls and they're going to turn around. They're going to go the other way. It's a loud noise and a bright flash. So there's a lot of tools, but the birds themselves are one of the unique tools that is used in industry, and the industry is of wildlife control. Some people refer to it as bird abatement. There's lots of people who have trained birds that are doing a really good job of keeping things like airports, landfill sites, and that safe, because it is a big safety issue when you have wildlife interacting with aircraft or even vehicles, machinery. There's a lot to the industry. But yeah, that would be my work day. And then home for 9 or 10, feed the bird, weigh the bird, exercise the bird a little bit. Up in the morning, if I'm off the next morning, we'll be out hunting. So I like to try to get up within an hour or two, depending on how late I worked the night before, of daylight. And I'll put my bird up to go hunting in a local spot, land that I have access to, because you don't want to end up trespassing. There are times where your bird may trespass and you didn't mean to. So you got to call your bird back down and move to a field that you know you were able to hunt. And we'll go out for a few hours in the morning, typically a 4 or 5 hour hunt or so. By the end of that, I'm a little tired, to be honest. So the bird may go 8 hours, and sometimes we have pushed it that far. But yeah, that's either an off day I'm hunting or a working day I'm working. But the birds are always there.
Sounds like it. When you say work the bird, I picture like the bird doing like lifting weights in the cage.
Yeah, well, one of the exercise methods you do is called a jump up, and it's really quite seemingly simple, and you think that's a workout for the bird. But so myself, I'll extend my hand, my gloved hand, with a bit of food, his daily food. You chop it up into small pieces so that they have to come to you every time for food, and it mentally repeats that habit of, this is where you need to be when you need to be there, right? And then some people say the bird is kind of their susu, their safety glove, is knowing that they can come to you for food. It allows them to hunt in a much better way. So the jump ups, I'll just have my gloved hand garnished with a piece of food, raise it as high as I can. I got about 8 feet up, and my bird is perched on the ground, and he has to pump the hardest, most like the movements that give them the best musculature, are those really hard upward motions. They can coast on wind and hardly ever use any muscle, but those straight vertical motions are the push-ups of the bird world. So we do jump ups with the bird, and he'll do on a daily ration. If he's on hunting weight, I try to give him 20 to 30 jump ups to maintain his fitness for the times I can't be out hunting him. And yeah, it's a good little exercise. It keeps things going.
Yeah, sounds interesting. And you are saying him. So out of curiosity, is that just because you have male birds, or is there a difference between male and female birds for falconry?
So for falconry, there are a lot of differences between male and female birds. The number one is the anatomy. So on average, birds of prey, females are 30 to 50% larger in body size. And that is for two reasons. Mainly has to do with breeding. They have to be able to pass an egg and lay an egg. And it also gives the women the power, so to speak. So the female gets to choose the mate, because if not, if you're really insistent and you're a hawk and you're a single hawk male and looking for a mate, if you push too hard, the mate's just going to kill you and eat you. And that's unfortunately in the wild, something people don't understand is these animals are based on instinct. They're territorial. They have a lot of hormones going on at certain times of the year, and they don't have the emotional capacity that a mammal does. They can bond with you, but they will never love you. My bird and I have trust and respect all day long. He's great. I've done a lot of work with him, but in terms of him loving me, if I was to release this bird, and my bird being a wild caught bird, he would go out there and live his life just the same way and probably not think, man, I missed that guy with the glove, because he would be actively hunting and doing what nature intended, right? So male female differences, yeah, I fly a male bird. Just that was the luck of the draw with me. That's the bird that I was able to capture on my permit. And female birds tend to be what people go for. They're larger bodied, so they tend to be a little more successful, stronger, larger feet, and the feet are the dangerous end on the bird. A lot of people ask, do they bite? They can bite, but I'd rather be bit, because the feet are incredibly strong, and they have, between, on average, a medium hawk or a medium falcon, 500 to 800 pounds of pressure in their feet. So they're really effective at what they do. When they grab onto prey, the prey is dispatched pretty quickly, and that's something with the hunting as well. It's pretty ethical when you have a predator that's been adapted over the years to pursue this prey, and all you're doing is allowing that situation to happen, right? So, yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I'm spinning off of the scripted questions,
No
and I hope
worries.
that's okay. And certainly, anyone who's viewing, if you have any questions, please type them into the chat, and we'll make sure we address them. But there's one thing that you said that I just am hoping you can elaborate on, and that's that your bird is wild caught. So, what is that process for catching a bird from the wild and then taking it into captivity?
Yeah, so again, it's all regulated through the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry under your falconry license, which is comes with its own set of paperwork as well. You can apply annually. If you pay for your falconry license, you have a right to apply for a wild take authorization permit. And what this is something that the ministry and falconers in the province kind of got together on. Wild caught birds were how this started, right? Before people had them in captivity and were breeding them, the wild caught birds were truly the best of the best, because they've been honed by nature, right? They are effective hunters. That being said, to take an animal out of the wild and put it into captivity or a captive setting, for me, that was something I thought, that's not cool, right? Initially, you see it and you go, you're taking wildlife and taking it away. But the fact of the matter is, birds of prey have a 90% mortality rate in their first year. And yeah, on average, they're very unsuccessful in year one if they're not going to be. If they make it over year one, it's a big hurdle. And birds that make it in their second year tend to be those successful reproductive members of the population. So with the wild take authorization by the ministry, the birds that you trap, there's only 4 eligible species. There's a Cooper's hawk, sharp-shinned hawk, merlin, or a red-tailed hawk. Within that, each species have a certain set of parameters in terms of how you can trap them. There's certain methods that are humane and approved of, and those are the only options for obtaining a bird from the wild. As well, they do have to be a first-year bird. And for those bird ID nerds out there, you know that certain birds in their first year have juvenile plumage. It's meant to be duller, more drab, more camouflage. It gives them a chance to not stand out so much in the wild and be able to get by hunting and making a living without having an older bird come in and chase them off of territory or even potentially attack them. So for me, when I was out trapping, it was looking for a red-tailed hawk that didn't have a red tail. That was the goal. The juvenile feathers, they have a brown barring on them when they're young. So when I went out trapping, we would look for one, set the trap down. Bird would come down onto the trap, and as soon as there's a certain moment where the bird will behave in a certain way, and once they're on that trap, you know they're on that trap, and you run over, you pull it off, you hood it immediately is one of the best things you can do, because they're very visual, and when you put that leather hood that covers their eyes on, it instantly lowers their physiological stress. A lot of what happens to them is all through their eyes. So if they hear something, they won't react the same as if they see and hear something. So it's a really good method of keeping a wild bird calm initially. And then usually they have some external parasites. That's, again, a part of nature. Flat flies, which are Hypsiboscidae, I think is the family or genus. They are the creepiest things I've ever seen in my life. So you treat with a topical spray, and those parasites literally leave your bird in minutes. You see them jumping ship, so they're off. So the bird gets a parasite treatment. Legally, you put your band on the bird within the first 24 hours, and then that bird is yours. Now, with the wild caught birds, at any point you can release them as long as you go through the right process back into the wild. But for the most part, if you find a bird that works well for you and you have a good bond and the hunting is happening, and the bird is able to have that natural stimulation of pursuing prey. I plan on hanging on to mine. He's great. I've had a lot of fun with him. There's been ups and downs the whole way through. There's been moments where I've been wanting to let him go, but that's more your own ability to kind of cope with the challenges that falconry brings. So yeah, that in a nutshell is, hopefully I answered the question, is what wild take authorizations are about in falconry.
Absolutely. And it's really cool too that they can be just rehabilitated back into the wild, because normally that is an irreversible process. If something is turned captive,
Yeah.
then there's no going back.
Yeah, and again, the process of that is undoing what you started. You basically have to put them in an enclosure where they have no visual recognition of people anymore for a certain amount of time, and that way they lose all connection between human beings and a food source. And then you give them food like rabbit, if they're a rabbit hunter, or mice or something, prepared for them with fur on the meat, so that they recognize that is the new food source. And then when they get out there and they see a rabbit or they see mice, they start hunting and they get right back into that natural rhythm.
So cool. The power
Yeah.
of instinct, eh?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Oh yeah, they have some abilities that I wish some people had sometime, just to get her done, go for it. And it's survive or die with these animals, right? So in the wild, they're incredible, and being able to take away the option of not surviving for them tends to be a really cool experience too. Because at the end of the day, even if you're unsuccessful and your bird doesn't take any game, you no doubt you saw something you didn't see the last day, or the bird tried something it has never tried before. And so it's a constant growth, and you're always learning along the way, which like I said, ups and downs, there's frustrating moments, but the rewarding moments make up for it. So
Yeah, for sure. Very cool. Now, so then when you're out working with the birds, how much of it is just deterrent? Like you said, they keep everything away versus actual hunting.
so when you're using them for more in industry than the sport, the birds are, I would say, if I had to put numbers on it, about 75% is just prevention, and then 25% is actual wildlife interactions. So the preventative measures, falcons work well for this. What you end up doing is swinging a lure, which is usually it's an object with feathers or bait on it, usually a piece of leather, and they're all made to be a certain weight and to be swung a certain way. And as you're swinging this thing, you cast it out in front of the bird, almost like fly fishing. And right before the bird seizes it, you pull back on the line and change the direction of the bird. So the bird is doing these figure-8 loops on the wing, and it's exactly how they would hunt another bird. Falcons are experts at hunting feather, and hawks are more expert at hunting fur, is kind of how it was put to me. So having those falcons out doing these huge stooping movements and what would appear to be hunting behavior, if you're a starling or a grackle or a seagull, you don't want to be there because that bird's hunting, right? So it gives the illusion of a natural predator in the territory. So that's a good amount of the work that gets done. Sometimes people use eagles for this because they are so large and cast a large shadow as well. They're a great, as long as you have the space to fly them, they're a really good preventative way of avoiding wildlife interactions in a negative light. The hawks are where things get a little more up close and personal. That's more immediate action needs to be taken. You have a small flock of starlings adjacent to an area that is unsafe, either for animals or for humans. And you drive by, and your car can actually serve as a tool as well. There's a way of building in perches into your vehicle, so you literally lower your window, and at the correct rate of speed, and your bird knows to leave the vehicle, chase off the birds, and return to the vehicle for a reward. So that's really cool to see as well. In industry, that's the development they made that has worked so well, because the birds also recognize the vehicle. So even if they stray off course, you don't have to be out of your car. The car is home, and they'll come back to it most of the time. They are living things, and you can't predict everything. But as soon as you get those training patterns down and those routines in the long term, if you fly a bird over multiple years, usually you get pretty comfortable with that bird's quirks and what you can and can't do to get the most out of it and to push it to be the best predator it can.
That is so cool. I had never imagined that people would bird out of a vehicle.
It's a real thing. Yeah.
It's awesome. Cool. Okay, so you've talked about some different bird groups. Are there a lot of differences between species of birds within those groups and keeping them and what they do and all of that?
Yeah, for sure. So basically, the number one thing is taking care of your bird, making sure it has the minimum requirements, proper nutrition, proper amount of water, the right equipment on the bird, because you do end up using things like anklets, which are basically straps of leather that go around their feet, and that's how you maintain contact with the bird when it returns to you. You grab onto the jess, which is a small string hanging on. That way, if you're hunting and there's an unsafe situation and you need to keep control over your bird, you can do that. The other thing people will do is use different perching apparatus. So a bird like a red-tailed hawk or any hawks, they like to grab a perch and curl their toes around it. So a bow perch is what's used, and it's the shape of a bow, like an archery bow on its side, and they're tethered to a ring on that so that they don't get caught up. And the other option for falcons is block perches. Falcons are more flat-footed. They're usually from open environments. Like if you think of gyr falcons up in the tundra, they're landing on flat ice or flat rocks. So they like flat perches. In terms of keeping them in a chamber or in an enclosure, again, falcons require a little more height. They're typically just a bird that prefers vertical space, whereas hawks prefer more horizontal space. So you might want to have a longer or a wider setup for them. And there's a lot that goes into designing and making sure that these facilities are safe for the birds, because as much as you would think, well, what could be unsafe about it? Using the wrong type of screening on your window can cost you your bird. If you're using a chain link that is the wrong size and your bird ends up seeing something and for some reason flying into it and gets its head caught, those horror stories are something we've always discussed in the community of falconry and how to avoid them. So things like vertical bars are what you go with. The bird always just hits it and goes down. If they are choosing to try to get right up against it, it's just sliding down. They don't get hurt. They don't get caught. No feathers are broken. So there's a lot to the actual housing of them. But in terms of hunting styles, falcons are, like I said, long range bird hunters. A lot of people fly them on waterfowl like ducks. Nuisance birds like crows and starlings, which are actually open season because they're not covered under any sort of legislation in terms of the Migratory Bird Act. And as a lot of us will know, starlings are an invasive species, so they're not meant to be in North America, but they are, and there's a lot of them. So as falconers, that's a great option, especially in the off season in the summer, to be able to have a smaller bird of prey, say a kestrel or a merlin, and be able to pursue those smaller prey birds is really, really cool as well. Harris hawks are one of the best things that has happened to falconry, depending who you ask. I'm a big fan. They're the only social bird of prey really out there. And when I say social, I don't mean they pair up to breed. I mean they have family units very similar to like a wolf pack. They will hunt in a hierarchy. The oldest female takes the lead. The young males that aren't the best flyers yet will run under bushes on foot and flush out game so that the more mature birds are successful in catching it. And at the end, they're allowed in to come eat. They're incredible. And if you have one that's well socialized, both with people and other birds, there's no reason I couldn't take my Harris hawk out, call my buddy up. Hey man, is your bird on weight? Yeah, let's put them up together. And then you get to see an interaction between two different predators cooperatively. Because at the end of the day, if you do catch something, you just reward both birds for their efforts, no matter which one was the one that actually sealed the deal. So yeah, there is a ton of diversity in the sport, but the basics are what you have to get down, and the best thing for these are Harris hawks or red tails. They really are a little more forgiving. If you make a mistake one day, they you won't have a problem the next day. There are some birds that are so high drive and so they just need to hunt on a regular basis, and they're as soon as they're at step 2, you need to have steps 3 through 5 ready because they need to work quickly to get to that point where they're hunting, and you cannot kind of hold them back because your schedule doesn't permit it, because the birds will start to resent you for it. So goshawks are one that come to mind. They're an extremely high drive bird. They need to be hunted 3 to 5 times a week. Not something for someone like me who has a full-time work schedule that can limit my falconry to the off days or the weekends. A goshawk is more of a retirement bird in my eyes, for me at least, because I think that's the only time I would ever have the time to put into it. Unfortunately, I would do it every day if I could. But yeah, that's kind of some of the differences between different types of birds.
Very cool. That's really, really neat. So you mentioned legislation, and I want to get there, but we have a question from Shannon, who's one of the students in the Human and Wildlife Ecology course.
Awesome.
So, how early did you start hunting after you caught your bird, and do you need to train in a controlled environment prior to bringing it out to hunt in the wild?
I like that question. I like the words controlled environment. Believe it or not, you can have some control initially over the bird because you're right, Shannon. When you start training the bird, you think, well, if I catch it on Tuesday, can I be hunting on Thursday? It varies. Some birds take a little longer to get their routines down. The first thing you want to establish is fidelity. You want that bird to come to you, to come back to you, to trust that it's going to get rewarded for its action. Because there's nothing worse than having a bird just disappear on you in the field. And I've been there. I've seen it happen. I've lost birds. I've had colleagues and friends that have lost birds. And you come to the rescue. There's telemetry and GPS and all sorts of great technology to keep track of your bird. But that moment where you realize that you don't have control over it and it's gone is pretty scary. So I would say, on average, depending on the bird, hopefully you're hunting within 2 to 4 weeks. For hawks, like a Harris hawk is a great beginner bird. So 2 to 4 weeks, you would have the bird at least able to be up in a woodlot or wherever you're hunting. And as you're walking through, it's following along through the trees. So the goal is to have your bird right, right overhead, so that when a rabbit kind of shoots off, it has a good vantage point, or depending on the prey you're pursuing, it's able to do that. So yeah, it would be 2 to 4 weeks, hopefully, if you have the guidance and the assistance. Again, some people take longer, some birds take longer. There's genetic differences, there's behavioral differences, there's a lot to overcome. But you start with manning the bird, which is the process of desensitizing it to you and getting it to realize that every time I put up this hand, which doesn't have a glove on it, nothing bad is going to happen. So the bird will sit there and throw its wings up and, oh my God, I'm going to die. Oh my God, I'm going to die. For the first day, that's usually the reaction you get. And as soon as you get to the point where the animal is stressed, open mouth breathing, panting, hanging off the glove, you put it away, because it's not supposed to be negative. You want to decrease that reaction. You don't want to accelerate it. So you move really slowly at first. You're walking through doorways. You're trying to expose them to as much as possible as soon as possible, so that in the long term, there's less stress when you're out hunting and someone's dog shows up. Well, your bird will just sit there and look at the dog and look at you, because in the first couple of weeks, you brought it to your friend's place, had it on the glove while you're at the barbecue, and the dogs are running and the kids are playing and the bird's just taking it all in. So when your bird gets to that point, that's when you start working on getting it to come to you for food over small distances, usually on a creance, which is a long line, essentially, a leash, if you will. That's probably the most control you'll have over your bird. Once your bird is consistently coming at a good distance, like if you're talking 40, 50 yards flights, as soon as you ask every time, that bird is ready to be off the creance. And it's a big step to take, because that's where you do not have control. You can put telemetry on your bird, you can put GPS transmitters and have a pinpoint right on a map and know exactly where it is on your tablet or your smartphone. The technology is really, really good, but it's a scary day when you take your bird for its first free flight. And 9 times out of 10, the bird doesn't even notice, because it's so used to the same actions, the same activity. And then you start introducing game, and hopefully the birds are successful. But again, it's usually a young bird that hasn't hunted before, so you're building it and its experience as well along the way. So that's kind of a rough timeline in the process and the steps you take to go from brand new bird to hunting bird.
Cool. Very cool. So then getting back to some legislation, what are the major pieces that you have to be familiar with?
Yeah, I think legislation number one is, again, something you want to definitely educate yourself on before you start. I mentioned the wild take authorization, so there's lots of paper that goes along with that. The first thing is signing up for your license. Usually, you start with an apprentice license. Now, apprenticeships take a period of minimum 15 months, or they have to cover 2 whole months of October. And the reason being is that originally the falconry season began in October. Now we have an extended season that starts in September. But if you cover the beginning of 2 hunting seasons, as long as your apprenticeship goes as planned, that's enough experience for them, your sponsor, which is someone who's generally licensed, to take you out and go, okay, you are ready. I'm going to sign your paper and you are licensed as a general falconer in the province. So again, there's a lot that goes along with that. With an apprentice license, you may have one native bird. With a general license, you may have up to 3. And then there's people who use them for education, or avid hunters who have multiple birds on the go can apply for a commercial license. And that allows you, I'm not sure what the number is, but it's a higher limit of birds essentially. And that again is something that you have to put in enough time and experience to get to that point. But other legislation would be more related to the hunting side of things. So just like any hunting, it's all regulated. There are seasons limits, daily limits, possession limits, and these are things that as falconers we're not feeding our families for the most part with this game. We're feeding our birds with it. So when they're successful, that means they get to have the game we take in the field for the following days if they aren't out in the field. And again, there's for example, Eastern Cottontail are an open game from September, beginning of September to the end of March is the falconry season for them. And most people that hunt cottontails or rabbits are a daily limit of 5 a day, a possession limit, which means in your freezer, in your car, in your game bag, on you, in your possession, maximum of 30 in a season. So if you're putting away 30 rabbits and you're not able to keep up with feeding your bird that much, you're really out there hunting a lot, and that's great. But again, you stop at that point because it has an effect on the populations, right? And there's not as many people hunting rabbits or squirrels or certain quarry in the areas that a falconer can. There's a lot of areas where firearms aren't permitted. Hunting is not, strictly forbidden, but firearms are. So hunting with a bird of prey, as long as you have the right permission, you're not dispensing a firearm within a certain municipality. It's kind of nice that you have the ability to, as long as you're legally accessing the area you're hunting, use them in kind of urban environments or suburban environments. The outskirts of town tend to be really good to keep coyotes away, but there's little pockets that rabbit populations can increase, or there's starling activity if you want to have a small bird to hunt on small birds.
That's a much better explanation of possession than I gave the students in lab a few weeks ago. Yeah. So thank you for that.
No problem.
So in the wild, do you know how often these birds would be eating?
As often as they can is kind of the best answer I have, because if they could every day, they are pretty much, they live to hunt and eat, right? If you see them on a telephone pole, they're usually facing the other way. Or if they are facing the street, they're looking across the street at the field. They're looking for mice, meadow voles, rabbits, squirrels, small birds, things like that. A lot of wild birds will also scavenge, right? They'll take a bit of roadkill or something because it's a meal. Typically, wild birds, successful ones, are definitely eating every day or two. Less successful ones sometimes go 3-4 days. I know that birds in captivity, they can fast a day, and it's actually something that's beneficial to them because their digestive system isn't meant for a daily input of the right amount of food. Nature comes with hardship. So to fast a bird for a day can be a good thing. It allows their digestive bacteria levels to get back to normal and level out. They also have a crop, which is a chamber that's prior to the stomach. A lot of people know about owls and owl pellets. Well, all birds of prey actually do have a form of crop, which they create a pellet, and some of them it is called a crop. Some of them, there's other means by which they do this, but it's the non-digestible material gets turned into a pellet and spit back up. So having constant input there can cause conditions like sour crop, which is a bacterial infection within the crop. But things like fasting on a regular basis can keep those bacteria in check. So everyday eaters are really good hunters. Some birds are eating once a week and just making a living, and it depends on the time of year. Like February, when things are iced over and snowy and it's hard, those birds are pretty lean. They're just trying to keep muscle on to stay warm. And again, that goes back to the molting. Molting is a summer activity for the most part because the resources are so plentiful. So we mirror that in falconry by having our off season is when the birds are molting. And I would have him on the fist right now, but he's up to molt. So he's at such a weight where he doesn't even want to sit with me. He's totally fine to be on his own right now. He'd prefer it. And that for me is part of the give and take with falconry. That animal's worked with me and worked hard all season. He deserves the summer off, and he's got an enclosure and the right amount of food. And he's not my buddy anymore, which is fine by me because he needs that time where he can go back to the instinct of being a solitary animal. And then when I bring him back into the season, he'll get that stimulation of being able to hunt again. So, yeah.
And how long does the molt process take for yours?
I actually just had this discussion the other day with a colleague who's also a falconer, and he said that the best thing you can do is about 5 months. 3 to 4 months, a bird will molt, but there's a certain point in the cycle where every single feather will be replaced and regrown, and the feathers need a slight amount of time after that to do something called hard penning, which is when the actual base of the feather, where it attaches through the skin and musculature, that needs to kind of, so to speak. So otherwise, there's a chance that the bird's feathers can come out pretty readily. So 5 months is like optimal. A bird can molt out enough to be flown the next season within 3 to 4 months, though, if depending on how your feeding program is set up, and if you've got multivitamins going into the bird, there's ways you can actually force the molt at different times of the year. If you have a bird that flies in the summer and you have the right lighting set up and the right nutrition set up, again, you can molt a bird in the dead of winter as long as it's warm enough and the light cycle is being kept in a natural way. So, yeah, it's pretty neat.
That's really cool. Okay, so then what is kind of the bridge? Like, do you consider your birds pets, or are they employees? Are they team? What do you think there?
I really can't put, they are, a falconry bird is a falconry bird. That's kind of the best way I can put it. I don't see them so much as pets. Pets nowadays are usually an animal that you keep for an emotional connection, and they love you love them back. You do engage in similar activities. You take them out for a walk or whatever that may be, and it's a lot more emotional, and you get that emotional back and forth with the animal. With these animals, it's all the emotion is on us. We are the ones that are so excited when it happens. They're the ones that are doing what instinct is driving them to do. So it's the big difference is the emotion of the animal. The other thing with falconry, there are different ways to have birds provide education for people. Again, there's rehabilitation initiatives. There's things like wildlife control, where captive bred birds are used in that setting. That is sort of additions to falconry. It's not what I would say falconry is about. Falconry, by its definition, is hunting and taking wild game with a trained bird of prey. So I really believe that if your interest in falconry lies in having a bird fly to you and fly away and fly back, and that's an essential, but that's not really enough to justify having this type of animal in captivity. It really requires that natural stimulation and that outlet of hunting.
I think that's a really good way of putting it and looking at it. So then with other people, then, like, how do other people react to the work that you do, and do they think that they are pets, and do they want to pet it and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, you get a lot of people that they see an animal in a captive setting and they think, oh, I want to be involved in that, right? So I get it, because I've worked in facilities with captive animals of all kinds. But with the birds of prey, again, it's something that we try to always have this idea with the general public that it's not just for funsies. It's not a cute and cuddly. Unfortunately, these animals they have a purpose, and you, as a falconer, have a responsibility to your bird to fulfill that purpose. If you don't have the time, then there are options in terms of being able to send a bird to another falconer that has the time to work it, or you can schedule your year. Myself, I'm considering a second bird, but only something I can fly in the summer. My season, my schedule, my work, my family life, etc. I can get one bird hunting quite often, 2 to 3 times a week with my red tail, and we have a lot of fun. He's not the best hunter. I'm not the best hunter, but he still pursues game, and that's what it's all about. So for myself, if I was going to take on a second bird, I won't do 2 at a time. I just know I don't have the time. It's a big, big, big commitment, right? So, yeah, I hope that kind of answers the question.
I think so, yeah. So summertime, just because that's when your red tail tends to molt?
Yeah, exactly. So my red tail will be up to molt. So basically, the daily with him is, here's your food. Every week or two, I'll go into his chamber and do some cleaning. I don't even want to enter that area every day, because you want that bird to have that time to be solitary, to get back to it's natural instinct, and there's no stress on them whatsoever, which means that as they're growing in feathers, if I'm sure a lot of folks out there from Fleming know a bit about bird development and how they grow, while they're laying down their feathers, if there is a time where their body condition decreases or they're exposed to some sort of stress, oh, look, perfect. I actually have one. You'll get a fault bar. Now, this feather's actually really good. It doesn't have any fault bars, but it'll be a dull line where the color is slightly less that goes straight across horizontally. And fault bars are also pinch points when you're flying a bird where it's weak and it'll break. And what that is a disruption in the necessary vitamins and minerals and keratin being laid down. So it's a weakness that can occur. So you really want to make sure that when you molt your bird, you molt it outright. You don't lower its weight partway through. You get it through the molt. You get it to have fresh, good, mature feathers if it's a bird that's just coming into its first molt, and they're hard penned. And that way, throughout the hunting season, it's physically in the best condition it can be, in the best feather it can be, to get out there and hunt. And a lot of people picture a wide open field with a little critter running across and the bird grabbing on. I've seen birds go through wild rose bushes that I can't get through. I've seen birds just crash through, break sticks 1 inch around, and land on top of the game they're pursuing. They will pursue and pursue and pursue no matter what's in their way, and the same within the wild. So there is a bit of wear and tear. It's almost like folks who have working animals like border collies for sheep or hunting dogs or anything like that. Horses, even in the logging industry back in the day, those animals they have wear and tear because they are physically being used for a purpose, and mentally for them it fulfills the stimulation that they require. That instinct keeps telling them they're supposed to be doing something. So for birds of prey, that's hunting. And with a good molted bird, the season's always a blast. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, that's really cool. So there's another question from the audience. And folks, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll make sure we pose them to Zack. But Mitch, this is another really great question, I think. Is it illegal to raise and sell these birds and kind of trade and sell to other falconers?
My bird, for example, a wild-caught bird, 100%. I cannot, I believe the wording of the legislation is breed, sell, trade, use for commercial purposes, or otherwise profit from. He is just for me to hunt with. The reason that I took him out of the wild was not to deprive him of the natural lifestyle. It was to incorporate myself into that lifestyle and be able to be there and witness it. And again, provide him that backup plan of, if he wasn't a great hunter on Tuesday, he's got a meal Tuesday evening, he'll see Wednesday, he'll be okay, right? So wild-caught birds, 100%. There is no buying, selling, trading. That being said, captive bird breeding is alive and well in the province and in the country. And those birds, again, they're usually breeders kind of contact folks ahead of time and say, I'm going to have this many gyr falcons or this many saker falcons, or here's the types of bird I'm breeding. And they seek out falconers or programs that are looking for birds like that, either for wildlife management purposes or something like that. And again, those birds are still for a purpose. They're bought and sold, but honestly, that is just a matter of the expenses that go into setting up proper housing, veterinary care, nutritional requirements, time. The time thing is huge. People underestimate that. I'm on my quickest day with the birds, I'm an hour, easy. Sometimes it's an hour and a bit if I'm doing enough exercises with him, or if I'm out hunting, or if so the time investment is huge. But captive breeding of birds is regulated again by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, and it's something that, when done properly and done for the right reasons, it's a true benefit to the sport. Again, it's myself. I look at these birds, I don't see dollar signs. I see opportunities to interact with them and watch them do what they are meant to do. And it's something that a wild bird will never, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to do it in front of people. The odd YouTube video gets out there where you see something pretty cool, but being able to repeat that experience and grow that experience with these birds is kind of the magic of it. And that's something that I'll keep doing this as long as I can for that reason.
So then, is there kind of a trade-off where you have a wild-caught bird that's just phenomenal and you want to carry on those genes? you don't have the option to do that. But it sounds like the training can happen with sort of like half dud birds, so to speak.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So those birds that are really successful, the wild caught birds, you do think, oh my goodness, this bird's getting to an age where I could produce more birds from it. And the thought is there sometimes, but it's not legal. And it really more than that, it's kind of immoral if you're looking to profit off the wildlife. But that's why captive breeding is phenomenal, because like you said, genetics is a huge thing. Just like people who breed dogs and horses and cats and everything, CKC, hunting animals, service animals. If you hone in on the right pedigrees and genetic lines, you can actually produce a really good animal for its purpose. And it is best suited to fulfill that purpose, and it might even be easier for you to fulfill that purpose with that bird instead of the same species but another genetic line. So the breeding of birds is something that, obviously, if you are buying and selling animals, a lot of people can see that as potentially a room for discussion. Why are you doing that? What's the reason? But in falconry, bird breeding is always meant for the betterment of the sport, and you cannot better the sport without bettering the birds. It's more than an animal rights issue. You cannot mistreat a bird of prey and expect a result in falconry. It doesn't happen. You need to provide them that level of care, that level of respect, and that shows when you're in the field and they respect and trust you enough that if they are successful in catching game, they stay there and they look at you and they wait for you. And they will break into it and start to eat it, but they will allow you to go in there. I can put my hand on my bird's foot while he's eating and open up my fingers like that, and he'll eat through. He won't just grab my hand and say, get out of the way. And some birds will, until they learn to trust you. But the fact that they're so instinctual yet so trusting at the same time is really kind of one of the things about falconry that makes it so appealing.
It sounds really almost regal, like the relationship. I so wish we could have a demo, because I think that the students would be so interested in it, and it sounds like you have this awesome relationship with them.
Yeah, it's different, and funny you use the word regal, because back in the day, medieval times, etc., falconry was a sport of kings. It was the sport of kings. That's how it was identified. And obviously, we know now that there's both kings and queens out there, and there are men and women that don't have crowns that can still get, a falconry experience, be that as a guest joining a falconer on a hunt, or signing up for an apprenticeship and working your way towards it. Nowadays, it's not about being the most financially well off. It really is passion and a commitment, and you have to be prepared for those setbacks that, like I said, I've quit this sport every other day the last couple of seasons. I can't believe I can't do it. I can't. It's too much. And then you sit yourself down, you breathe, and you go, no, I'm doing this. And the bird will learn, or maybe I have to adjust my method slightly, but this is doable. It's challenging, and that's why it's rewarding. A lot of people get into it and get out of it very quickly because they go, I can't. What's the point? It's so much time. Well, if you don't see the point of putting in the time and getting the fruits of your labor, it's not really a sport for you. It's really, really a huge commitment, and you don't have to be a king to do it anymore. You just have to do what's right.
You just have to think like a king and commit like a king.
Well, if we could, yeah, that'd be great.
So another really good student question here. In your opinion, which bird would be more successful in hunting or in the long run, between wild caught or captive bred?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's pretty well accepted that wild caught birds are preferable for hunting reasons. Again, the actual fitness of the animal, the musculature, the skeletal system that's laid down in that first year, because they are still developing, is so important. And if they're out there in nature, getting those fundamentals down and developing their physiology, you're going to have a bird that's much more fit physically. Now, that being said, there's behavioral traits that come with wild birds. There's such differences. They're all individuals, not just by genetics, but by their behavior. My bird, I don't know what I did right or wrong, but he's very submissive. He does not mind me playing with his feet. He is happy to pop up on the glove. He's very responsive, always like that. I know some people's wild birds who they need to be careful, because if they come in on food, like if the bird's eating or has prey that is captured and they're coming in on that, they have to be careful, because the bird will leave the prey and come after them, respond aggressively, because it's a natural instinct. This is my food, get away. They're not social creatures, right? So the wild-caught birds, I would say, in terms of the physical fitness and the hunting ability, definitely superior, but the behavioral aspect of it can be a bit more challenging. Whereas a captive bred bird that's had a controlled setting for its youth, so to speak, and you remove it from that, it's mentally a little more programmable, you could say. It's a term that a friend and I throw around, is you are programming these animals. You are laying down the foundations they need to know to be a Harris hawk or to be a red-tailed hawk. And, captive setting or not, there's certain things that they just need to be able to do. So yeah, wild-caught birds, I prefer. I love how quickly mine came along, and he was really smart. But again, it is a gamble. There's no guarantees. And as soon as you put the band on the bird, you're pretty well committed. I mean, there are ways to release them, but if you want to truly make a go of it, you start with the bird you start with. A lot of people say, never start with this type of bird or that type of bird. Generally, Harris hawks and red-tailed hawks are the two that are the best for starting, because they let you get the basics down without being worried about the little mistakes along the way. In the long run, they're very forgiving. They'll end up, if 3 weeks ago you did something and the bird grabbed your hand, your free hand, and screamed at you, that's okay. That bird is just teaching you, hey, you're pushing it, buddy, back off. And then maybe in a month's time, that's not pushing it anymore, because the bird does trust you. They are living things, so it's always a gamble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of like a toddler with a temper tantrum.
Yeah, and wings. Yeah, essentially.
And talons. Yeah, toddlers
Yeah.
with talons would be a very bad deal.
Yep.
So then with the captive breeding, is there worry within the industry about any sort of like inbreeding coefficient, or are birds long enough living and creatures that mate for life anyways, that's not much of a worry?
No, that is something that a lot of breeders, it's an ethics thing, right? You want to make sure that whatever you're doing to produce birds is positive, and you're doing it the right way. So there are certain times where, like you said, inbreeding coefficients. So there's got to be enough distance between two birds genetically. That doesn't necessarily mean absolutely no relation. They could be second, third cousins, great grandchildren of. There are ways to do that without violating, what you're going to produce. You're not going to have a bird that is genetically deficient or develops metabolic bone disease, which is really common in some birds in its first year, or they simply don't hatch there, or they don't produce a full clutch of eggs. There's a lot that goes into it. But for the most part, people know where their birds come from, because all falconry birds in the province are also banded. There's a permanent band that goes on them to identify where they were bred, who they were bred by, what year, and it maintains information on the bird. And not only that, it's a bit of a security thing. So if you are hunting out with your bird, and you may have telemetry and GPS and all that on it, but someone else could come across your bird and actually see your bird and say, oh my God, what is this bird? And perhaps if they're able to get a hold of the bird and keep it safely, they can look at the band, they can call the Ministry of Natural Resources and say, I found this bird. It's got a piece of metal on its leg and it says SS147. What does that mean? And they say, oh, that's Zack Steele's bird again. Like, so to speak, right? So the banding process is great for keeping track of the information, like breeding and genetics and things like that, to keep it safe.
Cool. There's so much that goes into this. I had no idea. This is really neat.
It's a huge world, really, is how I would describe it. It's not a process or a certain book or a couple of days. It's a world in and of itself.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I have a question that I'm dying to ask, and I hope it's not insensitive, but
Go for it.
is there like a seedy underbelly like Tiger King realm of falconry?
I just finished watching that. It's not that bad. I've never come across some of the stuff that show presented. I think in general, I can't really speak specifically to falconry, but when you have animals, especially the animals that can do work or serve a purpose, a lot of people will look at those animals and see dollar signs. It's an unfortunate reality. It's person to person. I'm not saying everyone. I'm not saying anyone sees it that way in the falconry community. But there are ways of there's a healthy balance as well. There's some businesses out there that really do just want to teach people about these animals and this sport, and their birds are well provided for. They may not be hunting, or they may not be able to hunt. They can be rehabilitated birds that have injuries, but they still find a purpose for that animal. And if they fund their own business based on that, and the morality and the ethics are there, and the birds are really being taken care of, and the right things are being said, and they're educating people in a good light, that there's plenty of people out there that do that sort of thing. Myself, I've met some people in falconry that I simply don't see eye to eye with, but that's the same in a work setting. Any hobby you have, anytime you get a group of people together, they can be people who love fishing, people who love hunting, people who love painting, people who love watching Tiger Kings. You're going to have differences of opinion, and you're going to have folks that maybe aren't in it for the right reasons. But generally, especially through the Ontario Hawking Club, um, I can't say enough. I'm always ecstatic to go and visit. And if I see a club member out and about in the field one day, it's not, what are you doing here? It's, hey man, is your bird up right now? Because my bird's in this tree. Okay, no, okay, let's go. We're still good. And you go out hunting together, and it's really if you're in it for the right reasons and you're just open and honest about what you're doing or what you're trying to do, that gets you a lot of respect in falconry and in life, really, right? So just there's always those characters that we meet and maybe we didn't want to, but for the most part, falconry is so positive in this province. At least I've never hunted outside of the province, and there's associations in almost every state in the U.S. and several of the provinces. Some provinces, some states, it's illegal. So when you have this global perspective on it, it's even bigger that way. From Mongolia, where as a rite of passage in society in certain villages, children 14 years old, going on 15 years old, climb up the cliff, steal the baby eagle chick. That's your bird now. Train it. And the culture behind this sport and the history and the ongoing culture, here it's purely for the enjoyment of the falconer. It's not a sustenance living thing. It has nothing to do with the way our society runs, directly. But there are parts of the world where if you have a falcon, if you have a white gyr falcon, you have to be a prince. In certain countries, you have to. There's still areas of the world where I don't know much about falconry outside of my own experiences. I've done the research and the reading, but I'd love to go to another part of the world and see falconry in Dubai or in the Philippines, or areas where it's that much different. It's a world. Like I said, there's so much to it.
I have to disagree because I think you know a lot about falconry everywhere. That's way more than I
So far, yeah, I got the basics. But again, it's been years in the making, and um, a little bit of it is my opinion and what I like and what I enjoy, of course. But there's so much cool knowledge out there and just cool things going on with these birds that it's like a bit of an addiction once you're in it. I've got falconry books on the shelf. I've got a building for my bird and falconry set up. I've got, I'm always doing something to maintain equipment, or you're oiling your falconry glove, or prepping meals for the birds. It's a great way to spend time, for me at least.
For sure. I think the fact that you just reached behind your computer and grabbed a feather shows us all that you are immersed in this.
Yeah. You have a red tail, you got a few of them kicking around.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
It sounds like a nice collaborative community, though. I think that that is a much better approach than what is happening on Tiger King. So kudos to all of you.
The nice thing about the Hawking Club, an initiative I just got involved in for the first time this year. So I've done like this much of the work for it, but it's called Project Goshawk. So falconers in the province are going out and doing actual surveys, trying to find wild nesting goshawks, because currently the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry doesn't really have the numbers and the relevancy of nesting sites down. So it's very much this citizen science initiative that Ontario Hawking Club, a few members have put together, and it was a blast. I went out this year and was able to call in my first wild goshawk, and you're playing the call out of the speaker and you think maybe you'll hear a call back. This bird flew up within 20 yards of us and landed on the branch and put her wings out and screamed, because they're that territorial. That's how effective it is to play a call. They will find you. They will find where you're calling, and they will get you out of there. That's what their instinct is telling them to do, right? So, and we were able to locate a nesting site that's never been located before, based on, one of the more experienced club members who put this all together said, I think this area looks good. This area, we know there's a nest. And they're so territorial that if you find a nest, a 3-kilometer radius of that is that bird's habitat. There is no other goshawk nesting there. They would find it and they would either chase it off or kill it. They're that territorial. So as soon as you find a nesting site, you actually find a lot of good habitat that can be protected and preserved, right? So that's just one of the initiatives that's kind of on the go. The apprentice program that we do in the spring, the Luther Marsh, is there's a kind of outdoor education day there that a lot of club members will fly some birds at, and again, just share the experience and tell people what it's about.
Cool. And that was called Project Goshawk, you said, right?
Yeah, and that was through the Ontario Hawking Club, HAWKING. It's a word we throw around because what are you doing this weekend? I'm going hawking. Like I don't say I'm going out to practice the art of falconry. I go out hawking. I put the bird up in the tree, and hopefully we find something. It's a little different now, the modern terminology behind it, but there is still a lot of traditional knowledge there. That's the foundation, right?
And those citizen science projects are so amazing to get the public involved and informed. And,
Oh, yeah.
What an experience. That sounds like such a cool thing for you who knows so much about falconry, but for someone who has never really been close to a bird before, like that is just amazing.
Yeah, the moment that wild goshawk flew in and landed on the branch of this birch tree, and the whole branch seized, and she just put her wings out with such aggression, and I was like, oh my God, I want to do that every day. I want to see that every day. It was just one of those moments that I will remember. Even though I practice the sport and I fly birds, and I've had a lot of moments I'm going to remember within the sport. But again, being able to have the knowledge of how these animals work, so to speak, and then seeing a wild one doing that was just unbelievable. And we found a nesting site that's never been found before, which is fantastic. It's more contributions to the data set, and therefore, betterment for the species.
Yeah. And for our EM folks, maybe that's a good project to take on, is let's find these nesting sites and see how we can protect them. So it's,
I mentioned my connections at Fleming to the gentleman who's kind of heading up Project Goshawk, and he was saying, even as a co-op option for students who are looking at things like that, if we can line it up seasonally, usually it's mid to late March that they go out and look for nests, into April a little bit as well. So hopefully, if there's some Fleming grads or students or staff that are hoping to get out, I can try to get some connections going for next year at least, and get out there, because if you go too late and the birds are on eggs or hatching, and you go in and stress them, that's not the point, right? You want to observe and get your data and get out. You want them to remain in that natural setting, raise their young so that the populations stay, on the up and up, or at least where they should be. So being able to get some of our Fleming family over to Project Goshawk is something I'm hoping to look into.
Yeah, for sure. That would be awesome. Absolutely. Okay, another comment from the crowd from my dad. Hi, Dad. Yeah. So will pets take to more than one trainer or owner, or do they become loyal to that one person that's training them only? That's a good question.
It's a very good question. And the best example I have of this is my best friend is a falconer as well, because if you're a falconer, most of your friends are falconers. It's just sort of the way it goes. And he flies a lot of Harris hawks. He flies up to 3 or 4 birds at a time, along with a dog that presents them with an opportunity for prey. So he's done really, really well in this sport. He's at this point where he's doing all sorts of new things in the sport, and I get to help him and watch him and watch it grow. But my favorite bird that I don't own, I would put it that way, is his oldest female Harris hawk. Her name is Red, and when we go out hunting, Red is his baby. It's his bird. She knows who Dad is, but she kind of also knows who the uncle is, because if I'm out there hunting, usually I'm giving it my all. I'm pushing. You don't want to destroy habitat, but you do need to interact with like a brush pile. You take your stick and you prod it into the openings, and you think maybe I can get some prey to come out for the bird, right? And usually when we split up and start hunting, I look up and Red is over my head, because I'm going and going, and she's the same way. She wants to hunt. Give me the opportunity. Let's go, let's go. So whoever's working the hardest, Red will follow. And then we noticed not long ago that even when I wasn't working, she was over my head. So I'd gone out a few times in a row, and the bird recognized me as the individual who gave her best shot, right? So, and as well, I if he goes away on vacation, I'll go over and maintain his birds and feed them and weigh them if it's in season and do that sort of thing. They definitely recognize individuals. If you have a bird that works with only one person, like my bird, he's not going to respond the same to me as he will to you, but he will respond to you. If he's on wait and I'm around and you put the glove on and I call him, he's coming to the glove. He's not necessarily coming straight to me. So there are ways to, again, you want to desensitize them and socialize them enough that if you want to have your siblings, friends, parents, neighbors come out with you in the field and watch this, your bird should be able to just look at the crowd and go, okay, let's go. And also be able to keep in that mind frame of hunting. So they are one-person birds for sure. They really a bird bonds with its falconer every time, but there's ways to have it still be open to other people and accepting of other people's presence for sure. That's a good question. I like that.
Yeah, and it's cool that you can kind of get that teamwork and match personalities from birds to people. And
yeah, for sure.
You've mentioned the weighing a couple times. I'm wondering if I can just ask a couple more questions on that, and just how specific the weight should be. Well, okay, let me back up. How often are you weighing them? I know you mentioned at least daily, and then how much of a range is there for what you would consider a healthy weight versus a concerning weight?
Yeah, those numbers are always dependent on the bird. Every bird has its flying weight and a hunting weight is how I was taught. A flying weight means they will come to you for food. They're willing to actually put out the energy to cross that distance and come into your space for food. Now, a hunting weight is usually slightly leaner than that. The birds are in a really fit condition to still pursue game, but not so well fed and so fat, for lack of a better word, to sit there and go, I don't want to chase a rabbit. I'm not coming. Right. So you condition them, and you never starve a bird for days on end to make it lose weight. That's you're going to crash your bird. Your bird's going to resent you. That's not what falconry is about. It's not about starvation. It's about motivation. And you basically offer your bird food every single day. And you make sure that the way it gets that food is with the proper response, be that just to step up on the glove to start and then to do a jump and then to do a 3-foot flap, flap, flap across the room. And then you bring it out on the line and it's doing 50 yards. And all of a sudden it's going even further distance. So to give you some numbers, my bird, I can really only speak to his numbers. He flies at 820 grams. He will fly at 840 grams if he's fasted the day before. I've had him as high as 850, 860. But at 850, 860, he hunts no problem. His recall is different. He would rather be hunting than go home. So when I call him up to move to a different site, even there's a little bit of hesitation at 860 grams, whereas 820 grams, he's coming right back because he's like, what's next? What's next? What's next? Right. And a way you verify not just the weight of the bird, but the condition of the bird. They have a keel bone where our sternum runs, and that's where the weight kind of comes and goes. So you can feel down your bird's chest and the sharpness, so to speak, of that keel. The keel is like the leading edge of a boat. And if it's like this and you feel it and there's nothing behind it, what have you done, right? You need to make sure your bird has some musculature and weight to back it. But if you can't feel the keel, your bird cannot. It can fly, but it's not flying back to you. It's so well fed. It's in such good condition. In the back of its mind, it's going, I don't have to eat for 7 days. Why am I going to fly to you? Why am
I
I
can do
wasting
whatever I want.
I got a week, right? So they are capable of calculating. If I pull out a tidbit, which is a small piece of food you use for throughout the hunting day to not overfeed your bird, a small amount of food for a long enough distance, my bird will just do this and look and look, and I got to pull out 2 or 3, or a whole leg of a quail or enough for it to go, okay, that's what I'm talking about. And then he'll go do the 100-yard flight to come back to me, right? If it's a great distance. So they are so aware of their own condition. And as long as you are aware of their condition and being able to weigh the bird, the invention of a scale was probably one of the best things that happened in the sport, because it used to be just by doing a keel check.
Huh.
Just feel your bird. How does he feel today? Well, now we have it down to I have it down to a 20-gram window. If he's on the number, perfect. If he's below the number, I've done something wrong. Now, that being said, my bird could be at 750 grams and he's nowhere near an unsafe point where he is so in such bad condition he's going to die without food in the next hour. Your hunting weight can't be that low because they lose fitness. The birds can't fly if they don't have muscle, right? So it's this fine balance of tapering down their excess weight to get them to that mental state of wanting to hunt. And again, you do taper it down. I make sure that if I was working 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, he'd be heaviest by Wednesday, and then start bringing him back down Thursday, Friday, because I've got the weekend to take him out. And there's weekly routines like that. Some people have it down to the seasonal routine. By the end of the season, the bird is, my bird was flying at 860 grams at the end of the season. He started at 800 grams. So that was the amount of muscle he was able to put on that was essential to him, that it wasn't weight he was losing. And then he's really fit, right? So there's a lot behind the weighing and the feeding and the scheduling of that. You start to get an idea. I know that if it's above 0 degrees, 40 grams will hold him over for 24 hours to keep him at the same weight. I know that if it's below 0 degrees, he's going 50 grams between 0 and 10, 60 grams between 10 and minus 20. Anything under minus 20, my bird's getting 80 grams a day for sure, just to maintain his weight, because it's cold. And I won't put him under a heat lamp. When that happens, especially with a wild caught bird, if you start to condition them to being housed in a warm environment and then you take them out into the cold, it's shock, and you'll crash your bird that way. They cannot take that up and down. But he's a native bird. As long as his body condition is good enough to keep him warm, I would rather him be out there in minus 20 most of the time, so that when I take him out in minus 20, it's just another day, as opposed to being used to plus 20 and going all the way down to minus 20. It's something that you do have to, it's called weathering the bird. During the hunting season, if your bird is tethered, most people have a perch set up, they're tethered, and there's a weathering yard, which is, it provides them security from other predators. A lot of people line with mosquito netting because birds can get West Nile virus through mosquitoes, and I have friends whose birds have got it and gotten over it, which is amazing. But there's so much about the weighing and taking care of them, and things like temperature that you wouldn't even think. If it's cold today, I don't usually think I got to eat more. I probably do, but the birds do need to get an increased amount of food to match the conditions they're in, right? So it's it's a little more technical in that sense, but again, that's what makes it so rewarding, is you were able to line all these numbers up and make sure your bird had the food it needed throughout the week, and everything came together. There's so many variables in this equation that you pretty much, you miss one and it's just not happening. You're not having a successful hunting day one way or the other with the bird. So
Wow.
yeah.
It really is quite a commitment. Like, you're so in sync with the bird. It sounds like your bird is very lucky to have you.
Well, I'm lucky to have him. Like, he this bird in particular kind of made me as a falconer, and that's how I was taught to, is you're going to get the bird that makes you and really teaches you what you need to know in the way you need to know it to be able to repeat this process with another bird, or continue with the bird you have, or whatever it is you plan on doing next. But it's not something that you pick up in a month and decide I'm going to be a falconer by the 31st. Like, it's just not, there's no set timelines. Some people take a few months, some people take a few years, and it's all about what you want from the sport. Do you want to be taking 2 or 3 rabbits a day? Do you want to be taking 1 rabbit a day? Do you want to be out 3 days a week? Do you want to be out 1 day a week? And those are the types of conversations that, prior to entering an apprenticeship, which is when someone with falconry experience would sign your paperwork and take you on through the ministry as an apprentice, you want to talk to them first, because essentially it's like taking on a family member. I'm not at the point where I'm capable of taking on apprentices, so hopefully some folks tuning in didn't all just turn it off because they really want to sponsor. But I would love to. I love talking to people about it and teaching it, but I couldn't do it based on my schedule fairly. It's like a family member that you incorporate. If I had an apprentice, and I hopefully will one day, if my apprentice calls me, I'm picking up the phone. If my apprentice needs me, I'm going to my apprentice. That is the type, how seriously people take this sport, and to pass on that knowledge to another person, it's a commitment, right? Just like a commitment to a bird. So that being said, though, is there's so many ways to get involved without making a full-time lifestyle out of it, right? There's opportunities through the Hawking Club. There's educational programs. Anyone that's interested in anything with the birds can always shoot me an email at my Fleming address, and I'll try to answer as many questions as I can and point you in the right direction.
Awesome. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time because this is already way more than you committed to. So
my fault. I talk too much.
I'll open it up, just because we have a bit of a delay. I'll open it up to any final questions. If you have any more, please put them in the chat. But maybe as we just give them some time to filter in those questions. Are there any, you've told us a ton of stories, but are there any other cool stories or experiences that you'd like to share?
I actually wrote down notes for this question because I had some that I went right away. I went, oh yeah, this, that. So my first time lure flying a falcon was really cool. And again, this was not me as a falconer. This was in a work setting for wildlife management purposes. It's a completely different realm to what I'm used to in falconry. It's a whole different set of tactics. It's a different equipment, and lure flying in itself is like an art form. And it takes a lot of practice, and both you and the bird you're flying need to kind of tune into the routine, and there's physical fitness, there's mental fitness involved in keeping up with the speed the birds are flying. And I was extremely nervous the first time I went to fly a falcon, because I said, this thing doesn't sit in a tree and follow me like I'm used to. This thing is flying at me and at me and at me and at me, and I have to be ready to give it the lure and pull the lure, and it's quite a lot. So I was so excited, so ready. I unhooded the bird. The birds there's a motion kind of called rousing, where they basically fluff up all their feathers, and you hear the feathers go, and then that is a sign of contentment. The animal's ready. The animal's calm. The animal's good to go. And with falcons especially, it's like the thumbs up you need. So she did her rouse, her feathers all set in place perfectly, and she took off the fist and started flying away in a line. I'm thinking, oh, okay, she's going to turn around, and game is on, right? I'm going to start swinging this. She's going to turn around any minute now. Any minute now. Why are there two birds all of a sudden? And I'm looking at this bird that I am flying for the very first time, about this large in the sky, probably a kilometer away, with another thing in the sky that's about this big, and they're interacting. So she decided to, this bird was really good at her job, and there was a wild red tail that was in the area, and she wanted to go exchange some ideas with that red tail and inform him that he was not welcome here. Meanwhile, I'm terrified because I feel I've just, put this bird up in the air and now it's gone. And these are the things that happen in falconry. So because this was in a wildlife management setting, but I have been there, I've had that panic attack already in falconry. I was a little more ready for it. I said, pull out the telemetry. Where is she? Because we lost sight of her. And she ended up on top of an aircraft hangar, actually, which is they're massive buildings. They're like garages for planes, is how I would describe them. Because I was told, oh, yeah, go, the hangars. I'm like, well, I don't know this term. What's a hangar? So they're huge, tall buildings. And she was right up at the top. We tracked her right down. We went up to get her. We had colleagues assisting, and she was not coming to anyone except for her main handler. That wasn't even me. He was the guy that was training me with the bird. And as soon as he showed up, toot, toot, come on, she popped up on the glove, had her lunch, and we put her away for the day. And the next morning she did it again and didn't chase a red tail, right? So there are always, the big thing with that story is just the unpredictability. Everything can go right and it can all go wrong. So you really have to be prepared for that. It's a risk you take when you set a bird loose on the wing. Anything can happen. I've heard crazy stories out of the States about birds being hit by lightning, quite literally being hit by lightning. And again, that's a 1 in a million shot, you think, until it happens to you. Or a wild bird. Wild birds are quite territorial. So towards the beginning of the season and the end of the season, migration is on for wild birds, including a lot of wild birds of prey. So the spring is worse because they're looking to establish territories, and they will kill you if you are too close to where they are having babies. If you're a bird, right? They will come after your bird. They will chase it off. And if they can't chase it off, if your bird turns around and says, oh, yeah, let's go, it can occur. You never set your bird up for that. You're always on the lookout proactively for those situations that could go wrong. But if anyone says every time I've taken the bird out, it goes exactly as I planned, I want to meet that person because I don't know how. There's too many variables. And that's part of the fun of the sport is that it's so unpredictable. Your bird's going to do something one day that you go, never done that before. That was cool. And it's another experience and a memory you can put into your repertoire, right? So another story is Red, my friend's bird at the field meet. She managed to catch a squirrel, and that was exciting. It wasn't a great catch of the squirrel because the squirrel was looking to actually bite the bird while things were going on. And the dangerous thing with squirrel bites is that if placed in the right spot, or rather the wrong spot, they can actually do some damage, right? You wouldn't think it, but those things can bite. And I learned that firsthand because I went down to you want to get in there and keep the bird safe. And if the bird has not yet dispatched its quarry, I tend to do that because I'm not looking for a struggle or a battle. The bird's done its part, it's captured the prey. I'm going to be humane. Humane behavior isn't something the bird is looking at, but I'm going to be humane and dispatch the animal quickly, effectively, and just get it done, right? But more so with this squirrel situation and another bird, I thought I got to keep the bird safe as well. So I blocked the head of the squirrel with my gloved hand, realizing I'm wearing a winter glove, not my standard quarter-inch thick leather falconry glove. So squirrels can bite very, very hard. And I took a bite very, very hard in my hand, and it hurt, but the bird didn't take the bite, which is the important part. So there are all sorts of crazy stories and situations you find yourself in, and you just rely on what you've learned and do your best and have fun. Really, for me, this is not something I do to put meat on the table, and it's not something I do to make a living. It's the sport of falconry is about enjoying it and having fun doing it. So, it's lifelong. You're going to grow, you're going to learn, and you make a lot of really good friends and a lot of pretty crazy memories along the way. And just the unpredictability of it kind of forges these cool bonds between people and birds. And I can't say enough about it, as you can tell, because we're about a half hour over.
Well, and that unpredictability too, like that's such good life training. If you are trained to just be calm under pressure and, okay, this happened, now let's figure out what to do with it. Like that's
Yep.
adulting.
Yep. And that's something, it's helped me grow as a person quite a bit. And to also, at the end of the day, people will say, oh my God, I had the worst day out ever with my bird, and this happened. And I said, did you get your bird back at the end of the day? Well, yeah, of course. Not a bad day. Not a bad day in the field because you invest a lot of time. And again, we have the emotional side of things, but that bird and that animal itself has been learning and growing in its own way. And if you are not able to retrieve it at the end of a hunt due to whatever situation occurs, there's no heartbreak like that. And I can say that firsthand because I lost my first bird. I did not mean to. I was learning. I still hate the fact that it happened. I contacted the ministry. I contacted animal control. I took 6 days off of work. I almost gave myself hypothermia trying to find them. That was the lowest of the low that I've felt in this sport. But you almost have to hit rock bottom if you want to come back from it. So I learned a lot. I saved up the money. My next funds that I put into falconry was not for my second bird. It was for telemetry. I was I was new to this. I didn't know you had to fly with certain transmitters on, and the bare minimum is to fly with telemetry. So at least you can hone in on in a straight line on its location. Again, it's a lot of money. It's several thousand to get a receiver and some transmitters in from the States because there's only certain companies that do this for falconry birds. But it's an investment that from that moment on I knew I had to make, and I will not fly a bird. I will not fly a bird without a transmitter because to me it's so stress free when you know you have that backup plan. And since I bought it, I've used it once, and it wasn't to find my bird. it was because my bird actually pulled it off, and I had to find the transmitter, which is about the size of a quarter, with an antenna coming off of it in a field somewhere. And we pinpointed it down to the base of a certain tree. This gentleman that was with me knew telemetry inside and out. He says probably 6 to 8 feet off the ground, because on a dead straight level the signal's not as strong, but when you tilt it up, it's he's like, so it's either it's resting in something, and it was hung up on a vine 6 to 8 feet at the base of the tree that he said it would be.
Wow.
And I got it back. So if that's on a bird, if you don't even have to get that close, your bird will see you and probably move. Or if you've got a really strong signal, just put your glove up and call your bird back. Usually it's with a whistle, and your bird will just boom show up and, okay, he's back. Boom. All right, you're a little heavy. Tomorrow we're gonna have to, not fly so fat because you just went on an adventure. And there's all sorts of ways to manage those successes and failures, and there's no two ways around it. The best way to learn how to be successful is to fail. And it's the same in a lot of things, but in falconry, yeah, you're going to make mistakes along the way. Those are the lessons you need to learn to get to where you want to be with it. So, yeah.
So true. All right. So one more student question, and I like this one too. So thanks, Mitch.
Oh,
could you use an osprey as a falconer? And if so, do you know anyone who has one?
That's a question that I asked, because in my common first semester ecosystem skills lab with Josh Falvum, and I think week 10, I don't remember it that well, but my bird was the osprey. So, and having an interest in falconry, I did a lot of research. From what I've heard, osprey just don't work for falconry. First of all, osprey are a fish bird. They consume mostly fish. So to be able to fly them and take, it's not really a predatory drive, it's more of a fisherman's drive, so to speak, right? So to be able to get control over your bird and have it pursue prey, unless you're in chest waders or a kayak, I'm not sure how it would work with an osprey. But more importantly, the thing with osprey is that they simply do not take well to the captive setting and the routines of falconry. They're very high stress, high strung birds that don't want to be there. They're incredible because physiologically, there's two different types of feet in birds of prey. I think it's areodactyle and zygodactyl, but I forget what the scientific terms are. 3 in the front and 1 in the back. How do I show this? 1 in the back is a hawk or a falcon, because these 3 are for getting a hold of something. The back talon is called the helix. It's the power talon that gets driven in and it gets the job done, so to speak. Owls, which are experts in catching small birds or small mammals, have kind of 2 in the front and 2 in the back. So when they grab onto something, it's more of a like the claw machine when you're a kid trying to get toys. Smaller target, more spread out toes. Osprey are incredible because they actually have the ability to flip that digit from either the 2 in the front, 2 in the back, to 3 in the front, 1 in the back. So when they're perching on a tree, they're perching like a hawk. But when they're grabbing onto a fish, they actually have that same kind of 4-toed claw maneuver that an owl does. And they have a socket that the digit slides in and out. They're incredible birds, and I really wish they could be used for falconry. But unfortunately, from what I've seen and researched, they just don't take to it. Yeah, it would be really, really cool. And I'm sure there are ways to handle them and perhaps get them flying and coming to you. That could have been done. Again, this world of falconry is so big and so expansive. Maybe, but also in terms of legalities, I don't believe in the province that you can use them as a falconry bird. Which is first and foremost. You got to stick within the regulations. The fact that we're allowed to do this in any capacity in the province is pretty amazing. So the few restrictions we have and the few fees we have to pay, I'm less than $20 a year for my falconry license.
Wow.
That's something I would gladly contribute to the ministry to make sure this sport remains intact and regulated properly, right? So, but maybe one day, Mitch, you could be the guy. Be the osprey guy. Dream big, buddy. You never know. Like there's new things in this sport all the time.
And knowing Mitch and his passion for fishing, he probably wouldn't mind spending the day in a kayak or waders or whatever it took.
That's a good merger of passions there, fishing and falconry.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Zach. This is amazing. And I think the fact that we still have this many people after this long means that I think my dad summarized it perfectly. This has been really, really fascinating.
Cool. Yeah. No, and thank you for having me. And again, Sorry that it wasn't the in-person demo we planned, but we're all dealing with the effects of what's going on right now. And thank all of you who tuned in. If you have some questions, I have my Fleming email, zachary.steele@flemingcollege.ca. I will get back to you as soon as I can. A little busy lately, but if please, I'm happy to share information and try to get more people involved in this sport, because it really is something that's worth preserving.
Well, you are a really great advocate for the sport because you make it sound like something that, anyone would want to be involved in. I don't know how anyone can listen to you and your passion and not want to just go out and figure out how to get a bird. So
it's hard not to get excited about it. It really is a cool thing to do.
Yeah, it's awesome. So we have a year to figure out how we can get you in next year and condense this to 50 minutes because
yes,
in the lecture hall.
And more adder, as they say, and I'll be able to bring in some birds and do some flight demos, or at least talk about the equipment and all the things. The visuals really do help, and I'd be happy to do that going forward for sure.
Awesome. Well, we'll be glad to have you. Anytime we can get you into Fleming, we're happy to do it. That's for sure.
That's what it's all about. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. And to everyone listening, thanks for tuning in. I hope that you're all doing well, and we will talk again soon. All right.